Hey everybody, Nick Espinosa, your chief security fanatic here, and today we are actually talking about U.S. pipelines in the last decade, not just Colonial, but multiple pipelines here in the United States, because China has apparently been breaching them for quite some time. Now here's what's going on. This is coming from the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, multiple sources on this. And here's what's up. The Biden administration disclosed previously classified details this past Tuesday about just the breadth of state-sponsored cyber attacks on American oil and gas pipelines over the past decade as part of a warning to pipeline owners to increase the security of their systems to basically prevent future attacks. That's coming from the New York Times. Also from the New York Times, from 2011 to 2013, Chinese-based hackers targeted and in many cases breached almost 24 companies that own these pipelines. And that is according to the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security in this alert this past Tuesday. Now, for the first time, these agencies said that they judged that the, quote, intrusions were likely intended to gain strategic access to the industrial control systems and networks that run these pipelines, and I quote, for future operations rather than for intellectual property theft. That has been a serious question that U.S. intelligence has had since this started. Now, in other words, basically, these attackers from China were preparing to take control of these pipelines rather than just stealing the technology that allowed them to function. That's a huge shift in understanding of what they are doing. Now, of these 23 operators of natural gas pipelines that were subjected to a form of email fraud known as spear phishing, basically that's very customized, tailored phishing that usually is going after executives or those with deep access to or control into the network or to money or simply the operations into the organization. The agencies said that 13 of these were successfully compromised. 3 were quote-unquote near misses. The extent of the intrusions into 7 operators was unknown because, quite frankly, they just didn't have the data, at least according to the New York Times. Now, with that, these disclosures come as the federal government is trying to basically galvanize the pipeline industry after this Russian ransomware group, and I'm not saying the Russian government, but they are out of Russia, tried to basically force down the pipeline, and they didn't actually hit the pipeline, as I've talked about, written about, etc., but they put that pipeline off, the company Colonial took the pipeline offline because the billing system got hit, and that obviously was a huge problem as Colonial provides about half the gasoline, jet fuel, and diesel on the eastern seaboard of the United States. That was a massive problem, and so basically, this is a huge, huge problem that we have here, and obviously what ended up seeing, what we ended up seeing from the Colonial Pipeline hit were long gasoline lines and shortages, and that basically underscored for President Biden the urgency of defending not just the pipelines, but critical infrastructure from attack. We then saw President Biden go and basically meet with President Putin in person a few weeks ago, or a month ago, I think at this point. Time just flies with these things, where they talked about the 16 core critical infrastructure sectors of the United States that should be off limits. Now, this declassified report on China's activities was accompanied by a security directive that requires the owners and operators of the pipelines that are deemed critical by basically the Transportation Security Administration, or TSA, to take specific steps to protect against ransomware and other attacks, and also to put in place things like contingency plans, which I cannot recommend enough for every single business that exists ever. I don't care your size. Now, the exact steps of these plans, obviously, and of this order were not made public, but officials say that they sought to address some of the massive deficiencies they found when they conducted reviews of Colonial Pipeline and obviously the attack. That company, Colonial, which was privately held, has basically said little publicly about the systems and vulnerabilities of those systems that were exploited, but we do know it was the billing system, not the actual pipeline itself. And so this actually has a couple of different things that makes me think about this. I recently, and I should say within the last year or so, had the honor of actually interviewing President Barack Obama's now former, obviously, White House cybersecurity advisor, Michael Daniel, who's now head of the Cyber Threat Alliance around the world. And the reason why I bring that up is because in that interview, and you can watch that on my YouTube channel, or you can find that in a past radio show of mine from about a year ago or so, probably easier to find on YouTube, he basically said, well, we knew in the White House that basically state-sponsored Chinese hackers got into the White House. They got into those systems and essentially playing cat and mouse. And as time went on, they were growing more aggressive. Initially, they would be caught, they would pull back, but eventually they would be fighting back. It was a very fascinating interview, but my point is that we have known about this for quite some time. This is not unusual to see this, which means that if you have 23 different gas pipelines that have been targeted, and we've known that for years, then even if it was quiet basically to defend infrastructure, why wasn't the government basically stepping up the regulatory and compliance processes of these pipelines years ago under the Obama administration or the Trump administration, which I kind of doubt because the Trump administration didn't do much with cybersecurity, but the Obama administration at least acknowledged the issue. Why did it take us getting all the way to the third president, in this decade, if you will, in the past 10 years, to basically act on this? And I think that's a huge problem. I'm glad they're stepping it up now, but we have to look back at this and realize what they're doing here. And if the question was, are they just trying to steal intellectual property, or are they trying to gain foothold, into the infrastructure to possibly shut it down in the case of, let's say, an all-out cyber attack or actual, land invasion or something? Both of these are very critical things. Both of these need to be defended against. So I don't care if they're stealing intellectual property or they're trying to get into the infrastructure. It should be stopped either way. And so here we are. I'm glad something is being done now. I'm not going to say it's too little too late. It's never too late, I think, to start getting good cyber hygiene in your life. But if I'm looking around and I'm one of these 23 companies, and I know there are organizations out there that bring these companies together at trade shows, to basically conferences at each other and all these kinds of things, why wasn't this forefront a decade ago? Why did it take Colonial Pipeline basically shutting down, their pipes because the billing system got hit, which caused a mass panic for something like 100 million people on the eastern side of the entire United States, and shooting up gas prices for all of us, to basically make this a concern? And I think that's something that we really have to address. We are continuously reactive to situations like this when we should be proactive as we can. Now, I will also say that, in the last couple of years in cybersecurity, I've no longer been the redheaded stepchild in the room. We're actually getting calls, as I'm sure many cybersecurity outfits are, that basically say, hey, we just saw one of our competitors hacked and we don't want to be that company. So what can we do to step up the game? So I think there is good news out there, but as these industries that think they're immune or don't take it seriously or don't realize or just simply behind the curve because nobody's sitting there talking to them about these kinds of things, heads up, it affects you just like it affects me and everybody else. So this is a huge problem. We're all in this together, and hopefully these pipelines will be more secure, and hopefully we will find more verticals of critical infrastructure that need the help and get them the help, or at least force them to do something when they really, really need to, even if they don't, because quite frankly, I think that's really important at this point. We can't ignore this anymore, and we can't bury our heads in the sand. So I think that's a huge problem, and with that, that's your news. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe and stay online, and please stay private. Thanks, everyone.